D&D players, what underrated spell ended up saving the day? Let us know in the comments below. Spider Climb. Being able to scale walls and buildings ended up being really good for getting into somewhere without going through the front door. Mold Earth. It's not a hot take, but it's still shocking how much you can actually do. A 5x5x5 cube is 125 cubic feet, which, if you think about it, is an immense amount of material and heavy. Using 125 cubic feet of earth to restrain a target for interrogation or to block a door, or dig a trench, or put out fires makes it an insanely versatile out-of-combat option that costs 0 resources. The DM is very amused with how I used that spell. Dakota fire pit, rocket stove, table and chairs, cover, sealing the entrance to a small cavern with our tiny hut inside for the night. The druid even covered it with moss using druidcraft and went into a small hole as a mouse. This is probably just going to be me being bad at the game, but I figured silence was going to be a niche anti-caster spell. Ended up using it to turn so many rooms into soundless halls of death to prevent detection and reinforcements. The DM ended up being like, yeah, no one heard anything, so you've cleared most of this level in small groups, and made the bosses that much easier. In other words, I cast Splinter Cell. Tasha's Mind Whip. Spell is bonkers. Upcast for more targets, also does 3d6. So upcasting is plus 3d6, different target, but the real benefit is the disable. On an int save. Add in Telekinetic and you can see the blood drain from your DM's face. Slap some melee people with Mind Whip, see who fails, move an ally out of range. If you're a Flee Mortals fan, the book calls this Daze. It probably also exists elsewhere, but I'm dumb and don't know. That book broadly says that immunity to paralyze is also immunity to daze. Up to you to bring it up. Up to your DM to implement it. Synaptic Static. A fireball's worth of damage on an int save, and everyone who fails subtracts a d6 from attack rolls without concentration. Awesome! I was in a party in which everyone, other than me, was able to cast Fireball. I instead had Synaptic Static. One time we snuck up on a cultist meeting and all prepared to cast at the same time. Needless to say, they had a rough day. Sleet Storm. Besides the obvious large area of difficult terrain and slippery ice, putting out large fires, dealing with flying enemies, providing concealment, and messing with enemy spellcasters' concentration. Plant Growth is quickly becoming one of my favorite spells. I'm playing an Archfey Warlock in a campaign where almost all combat is taking place outdoors, so that spell has been crazy good. Either to mess with enemies trying to get close to you, or giving them a single clear path that you want them to take. I got to witness Sleet Storm punch above its weight class. It was basically a 9th level spell. The party was infiltrating a fire giant's forge. They had killed the fire giant ruler, loudly, and were trying to get the fuck out as most of the compound descended upon the location of the murder. They ran onto a 2nd floor catwalk overlooking the smelting room. Enormous pools of molten iron below them with 4 fire giants working beside the pools. The giants look up, dip their hands into the molten iron, and pull out globs of it to hurl at the fleeing small folk. The catwalk was difficult terrain for medium creatures because it was a metal grate flooring with holes large enough for feet to fall into or trip on. The exit was on the other side, and the rest of the fortress was closing in several turns behind them. They had to cross it, and fast. Each molten glob did a fuck ton of damage. Dexterity save to avoid the liquid hot metal splashing up through the grated floor. So even if they made their save, they were still getting cooked by half damage. On the druid's turn, the player asked me, Sleet Storm puts out fire. What would it do to molten metal in a giant's hand? Oh, I see where this is going. I just blinked dumbfounded, but quickly ruled in my head that it would harden the metal and the fire giants below couldn't attack. But I wanted it to be dramatic, so I said, "You won't know until you try." So that's how the party easily escaped an Inferno gauntlet, while 3 of the 4 fire giants slipped and rolled around on the icy floor, unable to use their dominant hands, all while the 4th kept bashing his iron fist on the ground trying to break it loose so he could do anything at all. They escaped untouched, completely trivialized what should have been the scariest encounter of the campaign up until that point. Telekinesis. People can really underestimate how beneficial disarming, restraining, or moving a creature can be. I didn't understand the appeal of Fog Cloud at first, until I saw it used at its best. Enemy archers were raining arrows down on the party from elevation, where we couldn't easily reach them. The wizard, his whole gimmick was battlefield control, threw out a fog cloud to impose disadvantage on our enemies. A couple of our party members used the heavily obscured area to hide and get closer to strike at the archers. The wizard could then drop concentration, no action required, when our turns came up in initiative. So we didn't have disadvantage on our ranged attacks back at the archers. Calm emotions. This just fixes a lot of common problems. Nistol's magic aura. My DM had some homebrew stuff running for my Damphir and for my friend's Revenant, and our creature types registered as undead. Nistol's magic aura made me appear to be a humanoid and the Revenant to be a construct. We called him a sentient flesh golem, and we were able to get past some pretty zealous temple guards unhindered. Later, we were dealing with mages, so I used it to make our magic items appear mundane. I also permacasted on myself so that I'd always appear to have no magic effects active on me, and it helped avoid having some pretty handy buffs dispelled. Definitely campaign dependent though. Oh, and honorable mentions for Levitate and Vortex Warp. Levitate was an amazing single target save or suck against melee foes since it just had one saving throw, which I knew would be cool. But what I'd underestimated were the problem-solving capabilities it offered. Rendering a large object weightless, at least in the vertical plane, my DM ruled that things maintained their mass for the purpose of being pushed in the horizontal plane, to move around easily came in handy a few times, and floating up 20 feet got us a great view of the land on 2 separate occasions. Of course, I had a Raven familiar, so it wasn't necessary, but it did feel super cool, and the other character who hitched a ride on my back loved it. Now, Vortex Warp was exactly as useful as I knew it would be, so it doesn't qualify for this question, but get it if you can. I saved our rogue from being trapped in a hallway with a horde of vampires and put her at the exit to the castle. And then I saved her while she was downed in a cloud kill and placed her at the paladin's feet so she could do lay on hands and get the rogue back. Your team will love you. Utility spells are not to be overlooked. Blade Ward. We had a fun challenge where all of us were casters in a world where magic was outlawed and magic users were hunted. I decided to play a warlock as a tank and not a hexblade, since that wouldn't feel like a full caster and would be too easy to play the tank role. I picked the Fiendish Vigor invocation to start every battle with temporary HP, getting more during my action if I wanted. But why, you might be wondering? Blade Ward was better. I had the invocation where, if I drop to 0 HP, I get encased in a block of ice with a ton of temp HP, plus the one that gave me permanent mage armor, just all the tanky invocations on a Pact of the Tome warlock. I would run up and then just use Blade Ward. Offensive magic was banned, so I knew his world would be mostly physical damage. There was a sect of anti-mages and mage hunters who were authorized to use magic equipment and trinkets specifically for the use of hunting mages. Those did do magic damage. But mostly, I just became the barbarian, taking half damage with decent AC, and I saved my spells to use Hellish Rebuke as a reaction when I was attacked. I tanked so much damage, it was taking a couple of rounds to get to 0 HP. Once that happened, I'd get encased in ice, but by then our other casters whittled the enemies down. Using Blade Ward proved more effective for reducing damage taken due to my positioning in front, compared to the benefits of gaining temporary hit points from the False Life spell. Our perspective on Blade Ward has evolved significantly, recognizing it as an excellent cantrip. Fireball for unseen enemies. Run around a corner, fireball the corner. Escaped into a portal, fireball the portal. Invisibility, fireball everything. Who needs to aim when you can hit everything? Fireball is to D&D what strength bonk builds are to Souls-like, and what grammar is to Kevin Malone. Why use many spell when fireball do trick? It was also truly bonkers in earlier editions, when the volume of the fireball conformed to its available space. That's a lot of narrow hallways that just got toasted, as well as a crash course on calculating volume. Web. Being able to pick a 20-foot cube on the map and essentially lock it down has been very useful in managing large combats, or preventing enemies from escaping. Plus, the secondary effect of burning adds a little insult to injury. Fairy Fire can be game-changing, as can Bless and Bane. No more invisible assassins, and that D4 just might save your life. Or end theirs. Vortex Warp. I took it on my Divine Soul Sorcerer, and I find a use for it in almost every session I play. Repositioning, especially with AoE spells like Sickening Radiance and Dawn, is invaluable, and I took the spell basically on a whim. Nothing more satisfying than setting up your wizard's fireball attack after your turn by throwing a major enemy into the middle of the pack of enemies, so they all blow up together. Playing with the 2024 rules update, Jump is huge for mobility. Ended up pre-casting Jump before every combat. It's so fun. And combined with the new boots of striding and sprinting, you can hop around so much. Chill Touch. It's a cantrip with decent damage, but more importantly, it negates healing. One mid-boss we had fought had a regenerative ability that I used the spell to stop when we were looking a bit bloody. Stopping its regen was totally worth giving up a bit of damage and becoming the boss's main target. I use Thaumaturgy about 10 times a session. I get so much use out of Thunderstep, especially when paired with Eladrin Phase Step. Bonus action Phase Step to get to a grappled ally, Thunderstep away with said ally, while also doing a decent bit of damage. Mwah! Exquisite. My wizard friend cast Grease in close quarters combat, and I kid you not, the enemies, around 4 at the time, could not move at all and kept getting knocked prone. He memorized it after it worked again. However, that was the day he swapped out Featherfall just before we ended up falling 500 feet from the sky. Don't worry, we survived. Playing Rime of the Frost Maiden. Shape Water. I used it constantly to erase tracks in snow, create stairways and ice walls, and even build igloos for shelter as we traveled. Minor Illusion, especially when paired with Keen Mind from OG 5th edition. Never worry about losing your spellbook ever again. Featherfall has saved my ass more times than I'd care to admit. It's such a good spell. It also opens up routes you wouldn't normally be able to take. Jumping down to the bottom of a ravine just to see what's down there, or from a tower balcony to escape the guards. Gust of Wind. Stacks with difficult terrain. The push effect adds up to a lot of extra forced movement, especially when combined with EB/ARB, Eldritch Blast plus Agonizing Blast and Repelling Blast. Works very well in hallways, which are already desirable positions to defend from in a dungeon. Web, Sleet Storm plus GOW plus double EB/ARB is insane control. Locate Object. There's a shit ton of times you'll be chasing a MacGuffin in the campaign, Plus, if you're looking for an enemy and have previously seen them, you can do it on their jewelry or something they would wear or hold. Now, I know Tensor's transformation isn't super great, you can't cast spells, it requires concentration, and it's a high-level spell. One hit and it's gone, so it's not optimal. I get it. However, as a martial wizard in a smaller party, I often find myself alone or on the front lines. This spell lets me soak damage while dishing out about 75 damage per round, often taking out multiple enemies in a turn if they're low enough. It's probably not the most optimal choice, but I save resources and deal great damage. Plus, I have a solid martial build, so if I drop out, I'm still fine and can go crazy with spells. Also, the flavor is just fantastic. It's so much fun to turn into a monster with a polearm and tear through people. Catapult is a good spell. What surprised me most were the creative options for using it, with objects like Alchemist Fire, the MacGuffin you're hunting for, or even giants trapped in a ball of weightlessness. I really loved using Catapult in unexpected ways. Hey everybody, Brian Von VA checking in after the vid. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, ring that bell, and let us know in the comments below. D&D players, what underrated spell ended up saving the day? And of course, if you want to save our day, join our membership program. You get early access to videos, and you keep the lights on running. We love you all. Please be safe, happy, and healthy. Toodaloo.